Hey everyone, welcome back to Dev Parkour. In this video, I want to show how you can create a custom Docker image or container image for WordPress. I think I mentioned in a couple previous videos where I was using WordPress with Docker that I thought the official image did some weird things. And as we get into this, I'll kind of describe exactly what I thought was weird and why it was a little bit weird. But the main reason that I'm doing this video is because my previous my previous videos that use that default official WordPress image, which actually, let me change my screen and show you what I'm talking about. So this is the official WordPress image, hub.docker.com/_/WordPress. The way that I was setting it up actually had some performance issues when using it on Windows with Windows Subsystem for Linux as the Docker backend. You probably wouldn't run into quite the same performance issues if you were using Mac or Linux, just because of the way that the Docker engine works with the underlying operating system. But basically with Windows Subsystem for Linux, you end up with the Docker images running in a Linux VM. And then if your files are on the Windows side, there's kind of a virtualization layer between Docker to the Linux VM that it's transparently running on. And then from the Windows Subsystem for Linux layer to your Windows file system. So you end up with two kind of file system abstractions, which for obvious reasons creates a performance issue. I want to try to avoid that. And there are some ways that you could use the official WordPress image and not run into those performance issues. I'm not saying that this image is necessarily bad, but the way that I think about things and the way that I approach web development and application development, I think there's a little bit of a better way to go about doing this. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I would create this WordPress image, and as I go along, I'll explain some of the things that I'm doing and why I'm making some of these design decisions. So to start with, let's take a look at the source for the official WordPress image and kind of see what it's doing. So here's the Docker file for this is the PHP 7.4 Apache variant of the WordPress image. This is the image that I've been using in previous videos. This is probably what I would recommend you use if you were looking for something. I think this is what is still linked with the latest tag on the official WordPress Docker image. I don't think they've upgraded that to 8.0 yet, though there is an 8.0 directory here. So you could check out the PHP 8.0 version of this Docker file as well. Basically what it does is it pulls from the PHP 7.4 Apache. This is the upstream PHP image for 7.4 using Apache as the web server. If you've watched some of my other videos where I'm building Docker images with PHP, this is the image that I use. I might use 8.0, but I am using the Apache variant. So very similar to what I've done in other videos. Now, most of this is installing dependencies and blah, 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 and kind of some gibberish. But what I really want to get at is this stuff. And it might actually be easier to look at in a script that I've been using for a long time, not for Docker images, but when I install WordPress on just a VPS, I actually use this script, and I have been for several years. And basically what it is this chunk of code right here. So basically what we have is we download WordPress, and in this case I'm using a zip file, and then I unzip it, then I move the WordPress directory to basically var www HTML. Make it writable by www data, because usually I think I run this script as root, and then I print some stuff out. Basically, this is doing the same thing, except it has a specific version, and it is checking the SHA sum. So the nice thing about WordPress is that they do provide these links, which make it really easy to download a specific version of WordPress. It's just wordpress.org/WordPress-the version you want, .tar.gz or .zip or that sort of thing. They're using curl here. I was using wget, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, essentially. And then one thing that I think is weird is they are unzipping it into /user/source. The main reason that they do this is because in the image that gets created, /user/source/WordPress, as they say in the comment here, isn't part of the Apache document root. It's basically just a kind of a backup copy of WordPress. So if you're going through and you're making changes and doing whatever, the files that get served by Apache get overwritten from this kind of backup directory. So you can do whatever you need to, install plugins, install themes, that sort of thing, and you can always go back to the original version of WordPress that you installed. That kind of makes sense, but realistically, that's not how I think about a Docker container. I would much rather have a slimmer Docker container, a slimmer Docker image, so that I just deploy a Docker image and it basically spins up immediately. No copying of anything. It just uses the volumes that I've provided. It's the version that I've provided, all of that. And this actually answers a question that I had in a previous video, which was what happens when you want to update the version of WordPress? Well, it turns out that they actually, let's go up a directory and look at this docker entry point.sh. When it starts up, it will, let's see, somewhere in here, it copies over, it copies over WordPress. So it copies user source WordPress to var www HTML. So that's how it accomplishes an upgrade. So you just would use a new version of the Docker image, and it should, I believe, in theory, just copy over all the new WordPress files, which is basically what we're going to accomplish with the way that we're going to build a Docker image. Except I want this to be super simple. I want this to be as simple as you just replace an existing Docker image with the new version of the Docker image, same volumes, same configuration, all that stuff, and there's no copying involved. It just automatically has those files. So slight difference, a little bit different architecture, but I think it'll be a little bit cleaner. The other thing to look at here is, it's not in that file, it's in the actual Docker file. They create a volume of var www HTML, which means that all of WordPress, the entire WordPress core installation, is part of that volume. I don't really think that makes sense. I might be underthinking this. If I am, go ahead and leave a comment down below. But I believe that I should be able to just put WordPress core as part of the image in var www HTML, and then what should really be a volume is the WP content folder. Now there are a couple other pieces, or at least one that comes to mind, that is a something that should persist between containers. It shouldn't, if you just remove the container and leave the volume, you shouldn't lose your configuration, the WP config file. And that's another thing that I think they did really well. I really like what they did here. This is basically WP config from, what was it, 581 or something? WordPress 5.8.1. Yeah, so this is basically the WP config from WordPress 5.8.1, except they added this function getenv docker, which does some magic, makes it really easy to configure with Docker. And then for every one of these constants, they've replaced it with getenv docker and then the name of the environment variable that they've defined. So as we build our Docker container, I will probably use this this file. Just pull it wholesale because I really like what they've done there. Now the one thing to check here is the licensing, and I need to make sure that they have made this a compatible license. So I would like to license mine under the MIT license. So I actually have it MIT license. And by the time this video is posted, this repository will be there. This Docker image will probably also be on the Docker Hub at probably bparks/WordPress would be my guess. I'll leave a link in the video description when I do publish this. This is the GNU General Public License v2.0, which means that sure, I can modify it, I can distribute it, I can use it for commercial purposes, but I believe that I also have to license this under the GPL, which is not something that I want to do. Let's see. Yeah, so this clause says that I need to distribute it under the terms of sections 1 and 2 above, which means that I need to allow people to copy and distribute verbatim copies and modify my copy they need to be able to modify their copy of the program that I provide, which technically isn't prevented from MIT, but by the MIT license, but just to be on the safe side, it looks like I probably won't. I won't use that Docker, this WP config docker.php. I will actually go about it a different way, and I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do when I get to that. Point. So, with that said, let's create a directory and let's start writing some code. Now I mentioned that this URL was basically a zipped up version of WordPress. Let's actually see what's in it. All right, so inside of this zip file, we have a WordPress folder, and then we have all of WordPress. And notice there's no WP config. This is important. There's just a wp-config-sample.php. This means that we can copy our own wp-config.php from the build context so that we can do whatever we want to it. This will be important later on. I'll mention how you might want to use this image in production. Creating a wp-config.php and building that into your image might be a good thing to do. All right, so now that we know vaguely what this zip file looks like, let's actually use it in our Docker file. Now in the original Docker file, they copied into /user/source, and I actually don't want to do that. I just want to unzip right where it is. And then what we'll actually do is copy everything from the WordPress directory to the current directory. That should do what we want it to. One more thing I want to check is if there are any hidden files. It doesn't look like there are. None of these files start with dots, so we don't have to do anything else other than just WordPress splat. So that should do the trick. Now, in the upstream version of the Docker file, they had this volume of var www.html. And I mentioned that I wanted to change this. So let's do that. I think that's what the volume really should be. And then everything else should be okay. Because we're just going to use the default PHP, Apache, entry point, and command. We don't need this Docker entry point, sh. But we do need to provide a WP config. Otherwise, I don't think it'll work. I mean, realistically, let's find out. One thing that we will have to go in and add is we will have to add some PHP modules in order for WordPress to work fully. It'll complain basically if we don't have a bunch of these. You know what? Just since all of this work is already done for us here, actually, no. Because of the license, I am going to write it myself. And I'm actually going to steal this from what I do in Glassminnow, which I'll try to remember to leave a link to the video where I created a Docker file for Glassminnow in the video description. Let's go off to Docker, dev. We need PHP Extension Installer, and then we need this. So let's start with that. And then what extensions do we need? We need those. So let's make this all part of the same command. Actually, you know what? Just to make things a little bit easier, we'll keep it as a separate command for now. Install-php-extensions. Install-php-extensions. And those are the extensions that we need to install. So with that, let's fire it up and see what happens. Now, if you don't remember the syntax for the Docker build command, it's Docker build and then a path, and then we do want to list a tag, just because eventually I will want to publish this. So let's do Docker build dot, right? Or options come first. Options come first. So -t bparks WordPress latest, and let's say dot. Let's see what happens. All right, and at this point, the image is done. So let's go ahead and try it out. All right, now that I have the command correct, it is up and running, and we should be seeing the WordPress page show up. We'll probably get some error that it can't connect to the database, but we'll deal with that when we come to it. Let's see what port it's listing on though. Interesting. Looks like it doesn't like the changing size of the console. That's okay. Let's see what it's called, and let's run it again. Let's start it. All right, looks like it's running. Okay, and it is running on port 49154. So let's go localhost 49154. There we go. We've got WordPress running. Okay, now notice it says there is no WP config file. Let's make some changes to make that not be the case, so that you can actually use this and create a wp-config.php file in, say, a dev environment. So we actually have two options for this. So option number one is we could leave this image exactly the way it is and just have it be the expected use case. So to let's control N, let's say I'm just going to call it Dockerfile2. Basically, let's actually name it Dockerfile so we get syntax highlighting. Let's call this child image. All right, so you could do from bparks WordPress latest, and then copy ... And I mean, realistically, that's all you need, because inside child image, you could do things like you could create a WP content, and then inside there, you could put a theme, and then say my child theme, for instance. I misspelled that, but whatever. You could also create a new file. You could create wp-config.php, and then copy. I did not want to open in Visual Studio Code. That's cool. Basically set wp-config, and then you could either hardcode database name, username, password, and so on, or you could do something like getenv database name, and the same thing for all these other ones. Right, that sort of thing. Either one of those is fine. Realistically, long term, I probably want to actually create a WP config at this level, doing all that. So inside this Docker file, I would actually do copy wp-config.php to wp-config.php. Now, if I rebuilt this, I think it would break, because none of those variables actually have values. But with those changes, that means that I could use it with I think this is in the Windows side, WP and Docker. I could use this with the Docker Compose file that I used in the previous video. So here, I could even just use these same names, so that all of this is still still accurate. Yeah, so I think I actually will do that. Yeah, let's get that going. So let's use these environment variables. WordPress DB host, DB user, DB password, DB name, and so on and so forth. And let me find my Visual Studio Code. WP config. So this was, that's not that one. This is that guy. So this would be pass. This should be user. And this should be name, right? So let's just do that. And I was actually editing the child image one. Let's copy that here. And let's put this in its own folder just so we can keep things straight. So this is base image. Move these two files over there. Move. We'll run that Docker build command again. And while that's running, I'm actually going to go clean up the other containers that are running. Okay, now that that's built, let's just test it out. Okay, it's running, and it's running on 49155. Okay, and that's actually what we expected. Error establishing a database connection, because the database host constants are defined, but they just have no values. They're bad values. So this is good. This is exactly where we want to be. So now let's switch over to this, and I'm actually going to close this and reopen it on the Windows side because that's the way I've actually been using it. I don't want it to be running through Windows Subsystem for Linux and running through Docker. It just gets a little complicated. So let's close that just so we don't confuse ourselves. Working WP and Docker, open in Visual Studio Code. This is PowerShell, by the way. All right, so now let's ignore the Visual Studio Code update for now. Image, this is going to be bparks/WordPress. Just say latest. Yeah, all that looks good. Host, user, password. Yep. I'm actually going to comment this out because this it doesn't have any effect right now. Now for volumes. This no longer applies because we're not creating a volume for the var.html piece of it that is built into the image because that is core WordPress. So we don't need that volume anymore. And now my custom theme, which lives over here, does still need to be mounted into var www.html wp content themes my custom theme, right? So now let's see what happens. I suppose I should actually save this before I run it, right? Let's try that again. And notice this this warning here. Docker Desktop has detected that you shared a. That's cool. And I closed it. But basically, what it's saying is that you've shared a Windows file into WSL2, and sharing across like that is could cause performance issues, which is what I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So let's go back to. Let's see. let's go back to the browser and pull this up, port 8080, and this should work a little bit better. There we go. This is the WordPress site that I set up back in that video a while back. My WordPress site, just another WordPress site. This is basically just stock WordPress. And presumably I could even log in and see some stuff. I'm not going to do that. But basically this is a new WordPress Docker container based on an image that we built. And again, I will publish this image shortly. Eventually, probably for multiple different versions of WordPress and possibly different versions of PHP. But for now, it'll just be PHP 7.4 and WordPress 5.8.1. The one thing that I do want to add is what if you wanted to add plugins, which is common, right? You would want that to be part of the volume. You would want that to persist across WordPress upgrades, Docker container shutdowns and restarts and that sort of thing. But we don't want to put it in plugins or themes inside this folder. Obviously, you could go through the WordPress UI and download and install themes. That's totally fine. That'll install it on the inside that volume, the one that's created by default, which is by declaring this, there's a volume that'll be created by default. So it'll store in WP content, right? Because it's obviously WP-content/plugins, WP content/themes. That's where that stuff gets stored. But I also want to make it a little bit easier so that you could jump into the WordPress Docker container that's running and run it from the command line. So you can actually script some of these things. That's actually something that I'm sure this video is getting pretty long by this point. I'll save that to another video. But that's something that I'm really excited about because I really like the idea of being able to orchestrate basically WordPress site builds. So I can define a WordPress version, I can define a set of plugins and corresponding versions, and I can define, maybe like a database backup or something like that. And all of those things, that is like the minimal set of information that I need in order to recreate a WordPress site. So that's something I'm excited about. I hope you're excited about it too, but I'll save that for a future video. But in the meantime, if you like this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Hit that notification bell. And comment down below if you try this out, if you like it, if you have feedback, other thoughts. Let me know. Let me know how this works. I think I mentioned in other videos, I'm not really a WordPress developer, so there might be some things that I'm missing. Just by approaching this from I'm a PHP developer, PHP application developer sort of perspective. Maybe there's a reason that some of these things that happen that the official WordPress Docker image is doing. Maybe there's a reason that some of those things are the way they are. That I'm not familiar with. So if you have an opinion, an idea, a thought, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate the dialogue that's been happening on my videos lately. And I certainly hope it continues. So thanks for watching. Have a great day, evening. You can see it's dark out right now. It's evening for me. Have a great evening, and I will see you in the next one.